Bang! Thank you for listening once again to another episode of the Business of Fun podcast. My guest today is Andrew Recinos. He is the CEO of Tessitura, and this was a really good one. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when we started planning for this one, Andrew said, I want to look at this podcast through the lens of the Fans for Life workshop that you do, because he felt that there's a tremendous value in the way that I make ticketing a process, or I talk about ticketing as a process. And the truth is I talk about all of your marketing and branding as a process. But I found that this was a very interesting way to have a conversation. So we had a great time. We talked about Fans for Life, obviously, but purpose-driven businesses, how to keep the business fresh, bringing new ideas into your organization or your business, how to understand growth, how to gain growth. Andrew had some really great examples. Ballet Austin came up over and over again. I believe my old stomping grounds of the EMP, the Experience Music Project, which is now Mopop in Seattle. We talked about the Roundhouse in London, in Camden, another favorite place of mine. We talked about the Lyric Opera in Chicago. We talked about vision and mission, enabling and inspiring the arts, commercial ideas, tons of stuff. But before I turn it over to my conversation with Andrew, let me remind you, many of you may be new here, or you just may not have ever signed up for Talking Tickets, but you should get it. It's at talkingtickets.substack.com. It is my ticket-based newsletter where I talk about how to market and sell the live experience, entertainment. So you should get it. There's always something new and exciting going on. I also do a strategy newsletter called The Business of Value. Lately, it's where I put a lot of the ideas that I've been collecting and putting together for a class that I'm creating, which has been so lovingly given to me as the strategy class I always wish I had when I was learning strategy in school, called Markets and Competition, Strategy in the 21st Century. I'll have more news about that going forward, but you can get a lot of those strategy ideas and a lot of my newest thinking about strategy and newest lessons learned there. And that's businessofvalue.substack.com, or you can get everything if you visit my website. That's www.davewakeman.com. There you'll find, I'll announce events. There's a store, there's a blog. You can get the newsletters, you can get links to the podcast, you can get links to anything I do. All right? So check those things out. But back to my conversation with Andrew. This was really cool. I was very excited to get a chance to talk to Andrew because I think he said, I believe, if I'm not correct, he went to Indiana University for undergrad and graduate school. I have a relationship with the Kelley School of Business, so I'm always excited to talk to Indiana folks. He brought some really great case studies. I really was inspired by the Ballet Austin story and their executive director, Cookie Ruiz, and how she got creative with creating new opportunities in the building. Andrew's ideas about surfing and how that plays into things. Ethnography. I mean, he hit on all kinds of really, really great stuff. This is a fantastic conversation. I'm really grateful that we got a chance to talk, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk again because I learned so much, and I think you will as well. So here's my conversation with Andrew on the Business of Fun podcast. All right, I would like to welcome Andrew Recinos from Tessitura to the Business of Fun podcast. What's happening?
Hey, Dave, how are you? It's good to hear your voice.
Thank you. It's good to see you. See, people don't know that I can actually see you when we're talking because I never use the video because I'm like, I don't want people to have to get dressed up.
Right. So they can't see that I'm wearing a tux, but that's okay.
Right. But I appreciate it. It's great. Right. And it's like I like the purple and the blue thing. It's like an interesting color combination. It's great.
Is it too much? It's not too much, is it?
It's never too much. That's the secret. Good. It's like if you over the top is better, especially if you're going to, be around the arts. I think you got to play it up a little bit. But this is I'm excited to talk to you today because what you did was you kind of threw down a challenge for me when we said we were going to have this conversation. And I was like, oh, I love a challenge. And you said, I want to turn you against you, and we'll use my language of like lovingly steel and fans for life to have a conversation about the arts and entertainment and the business. The business of fun even. So this is pretty exciting. So I'm going to start out by asking you why. Why do you want to use my language as
Yeah.
jumping off points for this conversation?
No, I'm happy to address that. So Tessitura is a software and community organization. We're a nonprofit. We nearly exclusively work with arts and cultural organizations that are also nonprofits. And so they're a big part of the live entertainment world, but they're just one part of the live entertainment world. And what I've really enjoyed about your podcasts and your blog is that you take a full gamut look at it. You don't discriminate between a nonprofit arts organization versus a commercial, a commercial theater versus a sports franchise. Like you think of the fan as whoever it is whose life is being changed by what is happening on stage or on the field or in the gallery. And so when I think about our community, the Tessitura community, the 800 or so organizations around the world that are part of our community, something that I'm always looking for them is inspiration from outside our world. I think that there are incredible things that we can learn from our colleagues who work in the for-profit and the commercial industries, just as I think that there's things that perhaps we can impart from what we've learned as a nonprofit organization. So the fact that you talk about this at kind of a higher level that doesn't care about tax code was exciting for me, because I'm hoping that it can also help me learn so that I can pass that on to our members.
Well, I am so grateful to hear that, because sometimes I feel that it does get missed a little bit. But some people are a little bit put off by it, and I was like, going, listen, I know that because as a trained branding expert, that 99% of the job of marketing is the same everywhere you go, and that 1% difference you can solve pretty quickly and pretty easily. So this is exciting to be able to talk to you through that lens. So knowing that, then let's start by talking about where you do look for inspiration for your ideas, right? Because I go everywhere. I mean, like you said, you see my blog, you see the podcast, and I will pull stuff. I keep one of those second brains in Notion, and I have, like, my goodness, it's all the things that I pick up in a day or a week. It's crazy. It's like the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, the New York Times, the Seattle Times, the Harvard Business Review. Cigar Aficionado is staring at me on my desk right now.
Yeah.
Along with this crazy book called Future Shock. But where do you go when you're looking for ideas?
So I am a voracious reader.
Okay.
So, certainly sort of your common business books, marketing books, Jim Collins, Simon Sinek. But when it comes to the business of arts and culture, my first source is the primary sources, is talking to leaders who are in it, who are in the arena, leading arts and cultural organizations. And I'm lucky as the CEO of Tessitura that when I visit, when I talk to organizations, I often am talking to the leaders of those organizations. And I am consistently amazed by the creativity and grit that the arts and culture world has, and the leaders have. I guess it seems like it wouldn't be surprising to hear that arts and culture leaders are creative, but I don't even mean artistic directors necessarily. Like, of course, the people who are making the art are creative, but I'm talking about the administrators, the folks who are balancing the budget and keeping the lights on. And I do think, I think there is a porous border when you are working in an organization where creativity is your product. You can't help but start to have creativity on the administrative side. But that's the number one place I learn. And I'm fortunate enough to speak fairly often at conferences and other places. And time and again, the thing that I do is rather than sort of spouting my ideas, I share what I've learned out there. I sort of name check organizations and leaders that are doing really innovative things.
Yeah, I think it's one of the ideas that I try to get across to people more than most. I mean, there's a lot of ideas I try to get across. I try to really have tried to, over the years, to turn the blog and the podcast into a bit of an experimental room for like my workshops and my classes. So the idea of talking to the people who are actually doing the job and seeing how people are actually engaging with your product, right? Yeah. That's called, the fancy business term is ethnography, and I try to get people to do that because I was like going, because I like this idea of creativity. Where I see the challenge is that too often people still get trapped in this feeling that they have to have all the answers, as opposed to doing what you're doing, which is going out and like listening to people and kind of getting the feeling for what people are really doing, where they're really struggling, where they're finding success, but where they're still challenged. Is that something that you encounter, or is that something that like a lot of, or do you end up finding yourself gravitating more towards the people who are creative? Or do you find a lot of spots where people are still, and I don't know exactly why it is. I mean, there's fear of change everywhere, but at the same time, there's reluctance to change that's not driven by fear. It's just the way we've always done things. And I struggle with that.
Oh, I think we all do. I mean, I think that, especially if you think about the arts sector, really the whole live entertainment sector coming out of COVID, there was this, sort of these two things happening at once. One, which was this sort of fear of survival, right? So the like bottom of Maslow happening for these organizations. And at the same time, this, being forced to innovate out of necessity. And it's been super interesting to see what's happened on the other side of that. I think that at least in our sector, the one thing that's happened is there's been a tremendous amount of turnover. There's been a lot of leaders who, I think there's a generational change already with boomers starting to retire, but I feel like it was accelerated during COVID. Just the sheer number of new executives. I was in New York last week, and every single meeting I had was some discussion of we've just announced a new artistic director, or we're just about to start looking for a new CFO. So I think that period of time, I think, forced us to either hunker down or get way more creative. And what I've seen, when you ask if I search these folks out, I visit our organizations all the time, and I see some of both, to be honest. I'm not going to name anybody.
No. Yeah.
But, I think that ultimately I can almost, someday I'll do a prediction market on this. Like, I can tell if an organization is going to succeed by spending 20 minutes with a leader of the organization. Yeah. Because if you come in and they're like, everything is terrible, I don't know how we're going to survive, we're just trying to get to the end of the fiscal year, I'm worried about that organization. Yeah. If they're like, boy, are we having challenges, but damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, we're throwing everything we can at it, like that's who I want to follow,
Yeah. I think, and you always have to forgive. Everybody should know, and you have to forgive me some clumsy or poorly worded questions on this one, because that was sort of the way I was meant to ask it. Was because a lot of times it's like people are self-selecting to talk to me, and I know that they're looking for a new solution, a new idea, because the people who are kind of like going, oh, I only got a minute for you, or I don't have any time. Why would I want to talk to you? Those are the people that I'm like going, I bet you something's up there. There's something not going to, something's not going to work out there. So that was where I was kind of, the angle was like going, do you, is it always like the people are like going, Andrew, let's talk, because we're, they're excited, even if the things are, they're facing challenges, and it's not exclusive to the arts either. I point out, whomever, I mean, in sports, my Lord, the inability to change your mind in the face of a business model that is not necessarily working. That's more stubborn than like any toddler I've ever met. So it's not unique to the arts, but I was just curious because I'm always like going, how do you people, like, how does somebody find me? And it's always they're like looking for that challenge of innovation. So I didn't,
Yeah.
you being in a different role, I didn't know if it would kind of end up being the same thing. Like, Andrew, man, come on, I want to make sure I spend 20 minutes with you. You know, just because it's just interesting because I'm always like, and this is, I guess, probably a question I have for you here is I'm always wondering how I can help people see that, like, it's not a choice of change versus stay the same. It is really a matter of change versus innovation, because change is coming no matter what. The innovation comes when you're an active participant in it. And you talked about innovation here coming out of COVID, which I think a lot of times innovation becomes a scary word for people, and it really shouldn't be, because innovation doesn't have to be these grand, like, new programs, new products, like new parts of their building or anything. Innovation can just be as like simple as cleaning up the way that people can, have ingress and egress in your building to make it easier. That's innovative, right? Giving people better F&B options when they come to your building. That's innovative, right? Like when I went to London recently, and was able to pre-order my intermission drink, my wife was like, "This is amazing. Why don't they do this in the States?" And I was like, "Look, innovation. I want to bring it back." Yeah. So I'm curious about this. Like how do we get people to embrace innovation, even though it's versus, because it's like a willing in opposition to change. Because again, change is coming no matter whether we like it or not. The world's always changing.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it in terms of, are you going to try to withstand the wave crashing over you, or do you want to try and surf that wave? And
I love a surfing metaphor. That's great.
Right. You know what? And to me, innovation is deciding to surf the wave, knowing that it still might crash over you, right? Like, I lead a tech company, right? And so we're constantly trying new things, and some of them work and some of them don't. But we've learned that, and this is well documented, that the more ideas you have, the higher the percent, like the higher rate that you're going to actually have one that works. Google is famous for celebrating failures, right? Like they throw parties for things that don't work out at Google, because it's reminding everyone that failure is part of the process and encouraging it, right? You got to bound it. You don't want to bet the company and fail. Right. But if there's a project you want to do and it doesn't turn out, then you move on and try something else.
Yeah. So I like the way that you phrase that, because one of the things that I try to teach everybody about marketing and being market oriented, right, which is the business school term for it, which just really means listening to your customers and like trying to give them what they want, is that you should always be experimenting, right? So you ask a question, you do a little research, which doesn't have to be a big thing, right? It's like go around, talk to 3 or 4 customers, go, I got an idea. Let me see if this works, and test it a little bit. You just said that, like, a good innovation culture tests a lot of ideas. How do you encourage that? Because I know, and I'll use an example of a team that I work with. They have a bad idea contest from time to time, and it's great. It's fun. Everybody enjoys it. They give it like a nice little goofy prize, and and they celebrate the idea in that way, so that it makes it safer to try new things and to have ideas that may not work. Because I think it's the security of the tried and true of the way we've always done things overwhelms people's willingness to experiment. So how do you turn it around? And do it?
So this is something I learned from a Stanford course that I took. So I didn't make this up, but the idea, what Gershwin's actually, this part, Stanford didn't say this part, I said this part. George Gershwin famously said, "I write 6 songs a day to get the bad ones out of my system." And so it's just sort of his idea of constant ideation, constantly coming up with ideas. What we do when we have something that we're thinking about, let's say it's a new product line, or let's say it's a new feature or something like that, rather than sort of traditional brainstorming where you get a bunch of people in a room and you just bat around ideas, which is fine. We do it a little bit differently. We actually will have everybody, if you're in the same space, if you can, we have everyone go into a different room. Like if you're in a conference center, everybody like just find somewhere, go out in the hallway or wherever, go outside, and with a stack of Post-it notes in 15 minutes to just write down as many ideas as you can about that thing, or how could we solve this problem? Mm-hmm. And then come back, and we just start going around the room, and we start putting the Post-it notes up on the wall. And invariably, there's some that are all grouped together because it's variations on the same idea. And then there's some that are just these wild ideas that are just out on the sides, but each one is different. And we find that that's incredibly important to do it that way, because if it's everybody sitting in the same room, as soon as one person says something, that's kind of where the group starts to head, right? You just sort of start down that way. And all those crazy other little ideas, even if they were in your head, you're probably not saying them because now they just seem like outliers. And that has been really, really, really effective for us. The other, I want to give an example from one of our organizations, a cultural organization it's about experimentation, and it's one of the most brilliant experimentation ideas I've ever seen at an arts organization. So this is that all right if I just do a little vignette for you?
Yeah, of course.
Do you like? Okay.
Run.
So this is this is about
the world is your oyster here.
Yeah. This is about a ballet company, and so to frame it, ballet companies are incredibly important in our cities, right? They're a lot of times they're training ground for young people. Most ballet companies have a school. They're often a beloved member of the community, right? It's where you go and see the Nutcracker and where your grandparents took you when you were little and all of those things. Mm-hmm. But ballet companies have also struggled, like most of the major art forms, dance companies. The attendance at ballet companies has gone down by 50% in the last 40 years. 30% in the last 5 years, although I don't entirely believe those numbers because that was COVID in the middle of there. So I don't think it's that dire, but it's not a slam dunk that your local ballet company is doing great. So then I want to talk about Ballet Austin in Austin, Texas, where they've been around for 65 years. Again, venerable member of their community. And several years ago, they built a new ballet school and beautiful state-of-the-art studios. And their executive director, whose name is Cookie Ruiz, she tried an experiment. She was looking at this ballet school and she was realizing that the kids, right, because it's for kids, there's only certain times of the day that you would expect there to be students, right? Certainly not during school. So it's after school, certainly not late at night. So really there's only a few hours a day that this very expensive state-of-the-art heated, cooled building was really being used. And so she tried an experiment. She's like, how else could we use this at other times to make more of our investment? And she had a retired ballet dancer who was starting to teach classes to adults. And so she said, why don't you teach a class to adults here and see what happens? So they announced that they were going to have one, introduction to ballet class that instantly sold out to adults, right? Go to to Ballet Austin as a 40-year-old and learn ballet. So they added another one and they added another and they kept selling out. So this is the idea of experimentation. Like if no one had come or if it had been a disaster, knowing Cookie, she's got one of the most brilliant business minds in the arts. She would have come up with some other way to use that space and to maximize that space. But today, 60 classes a week, 12,000 Austinites are going to Ballet Austin for their own health, well-being, fitness, and dance.
That's pretty great.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. And it all started with just the one class.
It just started with the one class, and I wanted to bring it up.
If it doesn't work, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Right, yeah, just do something else, right? So they didn't invest like, all right, we're going to invest $4 million in building an adult dance program, right? They just did one, and it worked. And it has also become part of the fuel for their overall success because you're a marketing guy. You're going to get this instantly. The other side of their business, the one that they're known for, is excellence in performance and dance, right? People come and sit and see the Nutcracker, or Cinderella, or Giselle, or modern dance. And they're always looking to build those audiences. As I said, ballet companies have been losing audiences. Well, here's 12,000 people who are learning how to dance, right? By some of their own dancers,
Yes.
who are in the building, right? So guess what? Subscriptions have gone up, single tickets have gone up, donations have gone up because they see that they're providing this value to their community. And in the midst of, arts organizations struggling at the end of their 22-23 season, which was still coming out of COVID, was their best revenue and ticket sales season of their 65-year history. And then last spring, their 23-24, they beat their 22-23.
And I'm not surprised at all, because 12,000 people coming in to take a class, that is a tremendous amount more brand awareness, which leads to physical and mental availability, which, all of you can't, I blurred it out because I didn't want to see the mess, but all these like textbooks behind me, that's like just brand management. It's amazing brand management. To use, since the foundation of the conversation was the Fans for Life, that's how the Fans for Life program started. I was going to be in Australia anyway, and I needed to go to Melbourne because I was going to give the keynote address at the Fan Day, which is like their league day for the AFL. And I had a day in between, I was coming from our friend Angela and Joe's conference in Sydney, Parramatta, which is lovely, and it was coming up in November. And
I'll be there.
I had that's great. I love it. I love Australia, but I had an extra day. And I was like going, all right, so I have spent 2 weeks in Australia, because coming from DC, it's like 2 weeks really, like every time I go. And I was like, well, what can I do? And so I said, I'm just going to try and see what I can do with a workshop. So I put together Fans for Life. I pushed it out in the newsletter and the podcast. And the first one got 35 people. And I charged $300 a piece for it. And I thought that was pretty good for never having been to Australia before and never having tried it. And so now I can take this thing and do it all over the country. I try not to oversaturate it, but it's great because just like Cookie, I tried something. If it had failed, what was I out? I was out the Eventbrite hosting fee. Right? I mean, because I didn't book the room until I'd already said, if I don't get 10 people, I'm not going to do it. It won't be. I'll just hang out in Melbourne. And, so set yourself, and that really is just like, come up with an idea. Set yourself a small goal, something that'll make it seem like, okay, this is great. I should investigate this further and go. It doesn't have to be like the example you were saying. We have to invest $4 million in doing something different. The ballet in Austin, we have this extra space that's not being used. We know that people in our community are looking to get together, probably looking to stay fit, maybe looking to learn something new. What if we did this, right? And it's just like a Venn diagram. We do it, and then all of a sudden you have 12,000 new people. They're not all going to be that way. But the thing is I bet you any organization that spent an hour with some Post-it notes could come up with an idea like that. Absolutely. Or several ideas that they could try, and they should be different. They because they should fit your city, your organization, what you do well. And that's 100%. One of the questions I want to ask you about as well is how do you get people to understand that just because you see something somebody else is doing well, you don't necessarily have to try to replicate it exactly. You should be putting your own spin on everything, because I think sometimes when I'm having conversations with people, one of the things I end up breaking down is the feeling that they have to have all of the answers for the solution before they can implement it. Or that a good example is, because somebody's done something in New York City, I'm going to take it to Kansas City and it's going to work the exact same way. And I go, or really the reverse happens a lot as well. So how do you have that conversation, and how do you help encourage people to put their own spin on ideas?
I think you need to start at the very top, as far as kind of what I call foundational language, whether that's a mission or a purpose or a vision. And I'm sure I'm speaking your language because I've read your blog posts. So I'll start with Ballet Austin as the example, and then I'll move from there, because Ballet Austin, their mission statement, and I knew I wanted to talk about them, so I have it here. Their mission statement is not like, if you look at ballet mission statements, they are mostly, rightfully so, about preserving ballet, dance aesthetic, creating exceptional ballet for our community, right? But it's all focused on the product, on this is what we do, which makes perfect sense. Ballet Austin's mission statement, the first 6 words are to involve and strengthen our community through the creation and experience of dance. And that little shift in language, I think, is everything. So what they've done is, if their goal was to have the absolute foremost ballet in the country, they would be a different organization, right? Yeah. Their foremost goal is to involve and strengthen the community.
Yeah.
And so they think of things like, how about wellness? How about physical fitness? How about they do a food drive because their building happens to be in a food desert, right? They're centering their community. That's the most important thing to them. So as far as when you say, how do you put your spin or your flavor on it? To me, it all comes down to the sort of the why you exist thing, right? It's what I mentioned Simon Sinek, like what Simon Sinek calls your just cause. What is that thing that you're aspiring to, which you're probably never going to reach, but you want to try to reach? And once you figure that out, I feel like all of the other pieces come into play. So we've got an organization in the UK, actually in London. Maybe you've been, actually, since you like going over there. They're called the Roundhouse, and they're a concert venue in Camden, in that sort of cool, funky part of London. And they're legendary as a concert venue. All sorts of incredible bands have played there. But they're also a charity. And they also have a really strong education program, which is it's, as opposed to ballet, their education program is about sound recording and podcasting and audio editing and the sorts of things you need to do to have a profession in sort of the concert industry. And so their mission could have been to be, the best concert venue in Camden, or it could have been bringing music to all of London. But their mission is, we're on a mission. Sorry, I want to get it right before I say it. Their mission is to raise the creative potential of the UK. Right.
Well, that's a pretty great mission.
Right.
And obviously you did your research on me because you know that I love this.
Yeah. No, I'm like totally. Yeah.
Because it does that change, that point of view matters, because the stuff I've been working on lately is a strategy course, and the foundation, like we were talking about, is what does success look like? And that's like, how do you define success? And this is it, because most of the time, and I'll be curious what you have. Most of the time, I don't see very, how do I want to put it? Because I think almost everybody has a mission statement. What I see though is a lot of the mission statements that aren't grounded in the organization. They're more, and I'm probably not doing this service, they're theoretical. Filled with a lot of buzzwords, filled with a lot of nonsense. There's nothing meaningful about them.
Right.
And I'm curious, like, if you pay attention to these things, how do you teach people the importance of these things? Because I'm sure that, like, using case studies like you've just done, people will be they'll probably want to share, or get your, let me run this by you, Andrew. And so how do you help people see the power of getting that mission statement right, that vision right?
How do I personally do it? I mean, a lot of it's one-on-one. I speak on this. I will happily share you a link I gave a talk about this in Northern England. We can
put that in the show notes if you share it.
I gave a talk about this last spring in Gateshead up in Northern England at our European conference. Because I called the talk Deep Roots, because, as I've seen arts and cultural organizations kind of navigate the storms of all the things that they've had to navigate in the last few years, whether it's COVID or economic downturn or high energy prices or inflation, The ones that I see kind of tipping over have these sort of shallow roots, like
Yeah.
their mission, to your point, like their mission is either so high concept that it's not useful, or it's so specific that it doesn't allow them to morph and grow. Like I'll continue to talk about Roundhouse. They could very easily have had a mission to be the leading concert venue in Camden, and all of which would have been great, right? And they would have tapped out because at some point there's no more places, there's no more seats. But instead they just finished building a whole nother part of the building that is all about, and I love this, it's all about, they realized that their education program was hitting youngsters, so kids in grade school, middle school, high school, and then you've got the folks who are professionals. But there was a gap. 18 to 30. They had nothing.
Yeah.
They had nothing for them, and there was nothing. They did their research. There was nothing for that age group, for that early career, want to work in the industry. So they built this whole new part of their campus that's just for that age group, and it's co-working spaces, and it's master classes, and it's community, specifically for, I think it's 18 to 35 working in the creative industries, and it's been a huge hit. And that would not have happened if their mission was to be the best, concert venue. But because they're trying to raise the creative potential of the UK, it was obvious, slam dunk, easily fundable, and very exciting.
Yeah, no, this is stuff I wish people would do more of, because number one, it extends the ability of your organization to exist, right? I mean, it's an existential thing. But number two, it's so powerful for creating community. And most of the organization, I mean, as long as it's in tickets and entertainment, at a certain level, they're all built around serving the community in some way, right? Sometimes big ways, sometimes small ways. And then number three, it fills a real gap, because in London, sure, there's like not a lot of places for young professionals to learn how to be in the industry. I would argue that that's almost a universal thing around the world. A lot of times, it's like the ability to get good education in these kind of careers, is often absent. Outside of maybe if you get to New York or you get to LA, you get to London now. But a lot of places, it's just non-existent. So this is like, to me, this is like a really powerful example, and it really highlights like something that I think, from the sounds of it, is probably close to both of our hearts, which is the first, the power of the power and the understanding of what research can do for you, and then also the willingness to take ideas, and pull them in from all over the place. So you said the Roundhouse used research. What kind of research were they using? If you have any insight into that, because I'm curious, because I'm betting it was not as complicated as people think it was.
Yeah, and I would have to ask them that.
Yeah.
But they're a very sort of intentional organization. I know they wouldn't have gone and built this whole building on a wing and a prayer. But I do know that they did the research, like any good sort of steward of funds. Does this thing already exist? Should we just partner with somebody who's doing this? And they found that it didn't, this specific thing. That yes, of course, there's co-working spaces, and yes, perhaps there's some groups out there that are providing some community for this, but they just found this just sort of desert for that age group. And it's like, how do we get from, I just graduated from secondary school and I'm not ready to run sound for Sting, but I want to someday, and you know what I mean? So I think that, to me, this idea of coming up with, whether it's a mission or a vision or a purpose statement, but something that's calibrated right. I think that so often, to your point, they're calibrated so far up in the clouds that they're meaningless. Sometimes they're calibrated, I think, a little bit too tactically. I'll give you an example. So Tessitura is a nonprofit. Our mission is to enable and inspire arts and culture organizations of all sizes to achieve their goals through, it's a little longer than this, but through technology, service, and community, which I think is calibrated right. right? It says what we do, technology,
Yeah.
services, community, but interestingly enough, the word ticket is not in our mission,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Right.
We're enabling and inspiring arts and culture organizations to achieve their goals. And over time, how we do that has changed, right?
Yeah.
And it will continue to change
Right.
because, back to your original point, change is constantly happening, certainly in the tech industry.
Yeah. I couldn't probably agree more. And it's also interesting that you go, the mission statement's a little long, but that, sometimes it has to be. But the thing about it is like you're just enabling and inspiring the arts thing. So then everything you're doing, at least to me from the outside, looks like it fits into that, right? So the ticket system is a platform, right? That helps
Yep.
you, allows people to do things. But you have your conferences, right? You have all of the things you offer throughout the year, and as part of being a member in that community that help
Yep.
teach best practices and give people, best lessons learned and, new ways of thinking. And all of that is really there. I mean, to me, like, I think how do I want to say it? The thing that you have just pointed out that makes it different than everybody else is that you understand that, like, the technology is just a tool, and
Yep.
and like, you don't ever lose sight of that, right? And again, that starts at the top and it works its way down, and it's very powerful, because if you didn't believe that, then at some point everybody else would stop believing in it, because they would be like, well, if Andrew doesn't believe it, then it's just nonsense. He might be
Yeah.
saying it, but it's crazy. And so to me, that's really powerful, because again, the buy-in has to start way up here and come down. But let me ask you about another kind of tricky area. It's not that tricky,
Oh,
but it
good.
can be. Oh, you like a tricky area? Okay.
Oh, please.
That's good. Well, no, what it is about, while we're on this idea of stealing ideas from outside of the industry and using things from all over the place, which we
Yeah.
started out the conversation with. I think the Roundhouse using co-working spaces and educational tools. They're pulling stuff out from all over the place. There is, co-working is a specifically, like, mostly a commercial thing. That's a commercial idea. One of the things that I try to encourage people is to have a little more willingness to think commercially sometimes. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to throw away your entire mission or your entire vision for what you want to be. But the reality is that if you're not making enough money to sustain your organization and your mission, pretty soon you're going to run into trouble, right? And we talked about the decline in ballet audiences. I believe symphonies have lost 50, 60, 70% of their audiences in the last few decades. Performing arts, and depending on the market, they have a hard time. If you look at the underlying numbers of sports, there's higher price points, but less people actually going through the turnstiles, right? This is a kind of a universal challenge. Why do you, I guess, why do you think that there's a reluctance to look at some of the ideas from the commercial
Yeah.
partners that we have in the commercial areas? And then we can turn
I
it around
think,
to, like, how can we encourage
yeah.
people to use more of it?
Yeah, I think that it's certainly not monolithic. Like, there are more and more leaders that I talk to that are 100% embracing sort of commercial ways of doing things while staying true to their nonprofit roots and values. I think where there is tension is often at the artistic level. One of the ways you mentioned symphonies, like, one of the ways that symphonies are making money these days is playing soundtracks for films, right? Like, go see Harry Potter live at the Jordan Schnitzer Concert Hall here in my home state, Oregon Symphony. And this isn't happening at the Oregon Symphony, I should also say, but there are places where, the artistic side is really sort of adamant that, that we don't want to, quote unquote, sell out. We want to make sure that we're, that we're staying true to our high artistic ideals. So I think some reluctance comes sometimes there, where artistic, I think it's since time immemorial, and this as a marketing guy, like, there's always been tension between
Yeah.
marketing and artistic. And so I think that's where some of the reluctance comes from. I think some of it is what we were talking about before, sort of a lack of growth mindset of
Hmm.
let's think about how we can change and grow versus keeping static with what we're doing. But I see more and more out of, again, necessity being the mother of invention, that more and more cultural organizations are embracing a more commercial way of doing things. And I think, leading the way is the performing arts centers that present Broadway and big acts like that, because that is really a case where, a Broadway tour goes out and one night it's in a commercial venue and the next night it's in a nonprofit venue, but the experience should be the same.
Yeah.
So I think that certainly from our perspective at Tessitura, we're making sure that the product that we're putting out is standing head to head with sort of the commercial needs of our organizations.
Yeah. I like it. The Strathmore, which is near me in
Yeah.
DC. I love it when they put on concerts because it's a wonderful venue to go see a concert at. So they
It's,
can
I
have
mean,
like
and
rock
that's,
bands and like
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
it's an
Yeah.
unbelievable building to go see. And then
Yes. And the
in
Tessitura
Seattle,
organization, quick plug, they are a Tessitura organization.
definitely plug
Um,
away.
but like, for instance, I'll give you another, for instance, the Lyric Opera of Chicago. So opera, you talk about expensive, right? It is the most expensive art form. I know opera companies where 20% of their ticket sales, 20% of their budget comes from ticket sales, 80% comes from contributed revenue. But you've got, like, the Lyric Opera of Chicago now does a great American musical, usually at the end of their season. So just think about the sound of music, right? Climb Every
Mhm.
Mountain, the nuns come out on stage, right? And normally, if you're going to see that live, it's going to be 10 or 12 people on stage and either a recording or like a 8 or 10 person band in the pit,
Yeah.
right? Because
Oh
that's
yeah.
what you can afford. I went and saw this. It was one of the most incredible moments of my life. Lyric Opera Chicago did Sound of Music with a full orchestra. And when Mother Superior comes out and sings Climb Every Mountain, there was like 60 nuns on stage singing, right? It was literally operatic, and it was Rodgers and Hammerstein, and it was completely sold out, and it was an incredible experience. And so that's the kind of thing where I applaud cultural
Yeah.
organizations that are willing to say we need to continue to change with the times and serve our audiences.
Yeah. And I think that's actually, to me, a good example of a way you can maintain your artistic integrity
Yeah,
while still meeting your cultural or your commercial demands.
yeah,
And I think sometimes, at least the tension for me, which I'll be curious about you, is that they don't the language, the way people are talking to each other gets a little jammed up, right? And it's, the, there's needless friction, I believe, in some of the conversations because that would be an example I would point right to, right? Or I would be my wife loves like Strathmore, like you can still do it, and like she wanted to go see Ryan Adams. We went to see Ryan Adams. He played a 3-hour show at the Strathmore in this beautiful, beautiful room, and that
yeah,
still fits the mission, right? It's like you don't
100%.
have to. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? It's like
Yeah,
this is one thing that I try, like I hope for. If anybody takes anything from this, is that like people will be a little more playful in the way they approach serving their audiences, right? It's because we started out talking about creativity. Probably we can kind of wrap up by talking about
mhm,
creativity again, which is if you're in the arts, right, in business or on the performance side, it it's of course a serious job, right? Because
mhm.
you're changing. To me, and I'm sure you know this. I talk about like how important it is that you're changing people's lives, right? These are
Yeah,
once in a lifetime experiences that people are having, right? You're
yeah,
moving people. I mean, there's like shows and like I went to see Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and that was like how I kind of
mhm.
got involved with Broadway, and it was amazing. The Sound of Music when Richard Chamberlain was in the touring production. I
Oh
watched
wow, yeah,
probably 20 times. Now, of course, I was working at the time, but I still
Yeah,
saw
yeah,
it, and I would make sure that I like stood right in the back. I always got the exact assignment so I could stand, so I'd have the ability to stand in the back at like certain moments during the production because it was like so amazing. Um, so if people, I just want people to be able to take that away from this. It's like going, be playful, be curious, be creative. But I'll leave the last word here to you. You know, um, when if you could, having this podcast platform and knowing the conversation we had, what one or two pieces of advice would you want people to like have stick with them?
Mhm.
What would you like? Because you're able, you have the Tessitura concert, and you're able to give a keynote, and you're able to reach that audience regularly. You don't need my
Yeah,
help there, but this will be a little this will be a little bit wider audience because I
yeah,
know that like this idea of mission and vision and being purpose driven is important to you, and
yeah,
I think it's really important as well, and that's one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you. So I want to, because these sports business people probably can benefit from this. So I want, what
yeah.
two or three pieces of advice would you give people, no matter where they are in this?
Yeah. I believe that live entertainment lifts up lives. Like it's what you just said. We are in the business of making memories. We are in the business of enriching lives. There is research that shows that attending a couple of live cultural events a year can reduce um, can actually reduce the risk of early death by a third. There's research that proves that, and I couldn't, actually, I know that because I do a lot of reading about arts and culture, and I was actually preparing for this podcast, and I was looking to see if that also applied to sports. There isn't research that shows that for sports, but there is plenty of research that shows the health and well-being benefits of attending sporting events.
Right.
But
And concerts. There is research for concerts. I don't know the
yeah,
specific
yeah. I
numbers,
meant
but
sorry. I should have said when I say I have a very sort of Catholic view of cultural events. Like I think going to see a Catholic with a lowercase c. Like I think going to see the symphony or going to see a rock concert. I don't believe that your heart and your endorphins decide one increases your life expectancy and the other one doesn't.
yes.
I do think that a sporting event is a different kind of thing. And
Mhm.
I've certainly gone to sporting events where I think I lost years off of my life, but that's a whole different. you know.
I've been to several Mets games where I know that like there
Yeah,
have
yeah,
been
yeah.
months and years of my
That's
life.
right. 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 But the reality is like when we collect as humans to be sort of washed over by this, either incredible artistry or incredible athleticism or incredible beauty, that is improving lives. And I think what the nonprofit arts and culture world, maybe if there's something that others could take from that, is that a nonprofit starts every year not knowing that their ticket sales aren't going to cover it, right? They know that not only do they have to sell their product to consumers, but they have to sell their mission to their community, right? They have to come up with some number, sometimes thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are willing to give them money to get nothing tangible in return. And so I think that they have to do that. It's necessity. They have to come up with a way for many, many, many people to not only like what they produce, but to believe in who they stand for. And I think that it doesn't matter if you are a sports team or a concert venue or a nonprofit, that you are going to see better, more enduring, more durable success if you can figure out a way to engage your fans, to engage your customers in a way that they don't just like your product, but they actually believe in you for what you stand for. There's one piece of advice that I would impart. It is that, right? I'm a Ted Lasso fan, right? The one word, believe.
Oh, you can't see it. It's I have
Oh,
my wife gave me Ted.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's the whole ball game. I really do. And I think that, you say, I don't mean to like completely keep quoting you back to you, but in one of your blog posts, I think you talk about the engines of transaction and I'm reading this now, that have come to dominate so much of the industry have broken the engines of relationships that power much of the entertainment business. And I 100% believe in that, right? Like that's the core of why Tessitura exists, is software that helps you make relationships. And so, doing what you can, whether it's through the mission, whether it's through the experiences that you create, whether it's through the venue itself, to get to a place where your fans are not just a consumer and they're not just a customer, but they feel like an investor. And I think when you get there, when they feel literally invested, that's where you get to the true believers. And I think that's how we all succeed. And I want us all to succeed. I think the world is a better place because of because of the teams and the venues and the art and the culture and the museums and all of it. It's life enriching, if not life saving.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's I was able to tell you a little bit before we started recording about how my experience, and when you said, "Oh, I like this because you cover everything," and then I listed all the different places I'd been, where it's like I've been in Broadway, I've been in sports organizations, I've been in museums, I have been everywhere, and I think the biggest thing especially because over the time the business of fun has gotten a little bit more strategy and brand related as I've taught these classes. The foundation of this podcast, though, was it was a love letter to the industry because I wanted everybody to be able to do better. I wanted everybody the ability for people to have and make their organizations sustainable. Because I knew that, to me, the arts will save your life, right? It will, save you. It is life affirming, right? Yeah. It is. I'll finish with one story, I guess. Here is in 2022. People know the story when I was super sick with long COVID, and I was I was hospitalized for 8 days. But the thing that kept me going was I have tickets to see Pearl Jam at Madison Square Garden on September 11th. And I made it to that damn Pearl Jam concert, and I had friggin' tears in my eyes when they started playing live. And it was just and it just made, it just put the whole thing in perspective. And it was amazing. And I've had that experience going to museums to see works of art. One of the things that amazes people when they come over to visit Catherine and I, they all the art that we have invested in, right? I've had that feeling at sporting events. One of the most amazing events ever was Chelsea and Tottenham. I took my family to that, and it was amazing. Baseball games, just everything. And so I agree with you, right? I just want people to understand how important your jobs are and how important it is to build those structures, those engines of relationships, not those engines of transaction.
Yeah.
It's just even though I touch a lot of different areas now, it's still this is where it really means the world to me. So Andrew, thank you for talking to me today. Let's plug some more before I hang up on you.
Sure.
Plug away. Where can people find you? Where do you want to point people?
Oh yeah. So
plug.
You want to learn more about us? You can go to tessitura.com. I guess that would be the first place. You can click on blog, and you'll see all kinds of interesting learnings that we've had. Often, again, from talking to our members and innovative things they're doing. We will be at INTIX this year in New York City. So if you're going to be at INTIX, come see us. We're also at the ticketing conference in Australia that you mentioned in November. We're always at Ticketing Professionals, whether it's here in the States or over in the UK. So we are in 10 countries, and we have a pretty big presence, especially in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US.
You sound like me now. But I'm everywhere, but these are the ones.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Dave. This was great. I had a lot of fun.
Let me know what you thought of my conversation with Andrew by sending me an email to me, Dave, at davewakeman.com. If you found this podcast informative, helpful, useful, which if you're hearing this part of the podcast, you definitely have found something useful, do me a solid and share it with a friend, colleague, someone who can learn something from these conversations like this one with Andrew, the upcoming one with John Allen from TKT, some of the things, the classes I've posted, Andrew Maleka, all of these great conversations. So share these things. Do me a favor and rate the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Helps me continue to get guests like Andrew. Helps people find the podcast a little bit more. And it helps the thing keep rolling. All right. If you don't already, check out the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. You can also check out the strategy newsletter, which is businessofvalue.substack.com. Or there's a pop-up box on my website, davewakeman.com, which is where everything shows up. All right. As always, I want to thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take it easy.